Hello and welcome to the Woollentwine Fibrestudio knitting podcast. My name is Jule and I'm the dyer and maker behind Woollentwine Fibrestudio, which is a small creative space located here in northern Germany where I play with natural dyes and natural yarns. Today I want to introduce to you a new yarn and tell you a little bit about its backstory, show some swatches, some samples, and yeah, just overall introduce it to you. And some of you might have seen some snippets on Instagram already, but this new yarn is a special one because it's kind of the extension of our limited editions that we used to have a while ago. And those were, those are yarns that I have fully locally produced in cooperation with local shepherds and a local mill, where I purchase greasy fleeces, attend the shearing, or like not every shearing, but attend the shearings most of the time, and then skirt all the fleeces myself, ship them to a mill, get them ready, and then get them dyed in several shades. So I used to start with these local yarn production projects. I think by now it must be 3 years ago or so, when I had my first batch spun up. And back then I was kind of a bit limited because I could not purchase huge amounts and have them spun and then have the big financial burden at once. And so those batches were just called limited edition 1 or 2 or 3 and were sold out quite quickly normally. But with this one I wanted to change some things, and for the first time I was able to purchase the full yearly shearing of a shepherd and get all the fleeces he had and get a much larger batch spun up. And so this time this is kind of, that's why I'm saying the extension of our old limited edition yarns, but it is in a new format. It's a bigger amount, it will not be released all at once, there are several weights and all these kind of things that I'm going to talk you through in this video. But I should maybe mention that if you're interested in hearing more in depth about the process, I have a whole video about local yarn production and my thoughts, my ethics, everything that goes into into all these yarns, into the collaborations with the shepherds. Because in this video I will briefly cover how it all came together, but I cannot really go in depth and tell you my whole, all the boxes a shepherd has to tick. So I can work with him, the whole story of how I researched my mills and all these things. If I would share all that in this video, we would sit here for way too long. So there is a dedicated video where I cover all of this. It's a bit of an older one and it's not about this yarn, it's about a different yarn, but I can maybe update this one at some point. But so far you can watch that one in case you're curious about local yarn production in general and what the, let's say, hurdles are sometimes, because yeah, one of the big hurdles we have here in the north of Germany is that we have a rough weather and rough weather conditions. It's slightly cold, quite windy, and not the most sheep-friendly weather, let's put it that way. Well, it is a sheep-friendly weather, but not all sheep can live here. So you need certain breeds that are strong enough to live here. And most of the time those breeds, they do have very rough fleeces. Just because they are not bred for wool, they are bred for landscape, upkeep, or meat. And I was very happy to have found a shepherd who keeps a certain crossbreed that is strong enough to withstand our temperatures and our weather conditions, but still has a lovely wool. And I teamed up with this shepherd a while ago, and for this batch we got the full shearing of last year. And when I was thinking of the name, speaking of the north being my home and being the home of these sheep as well, and having this, you know, having the north and its weather conditions and its harshness being very shaping of the yarn, because, you know, it has this, it carries the whole north through its fibers, let's put it that way. I decided to call this yarn Heritage, because it comes from where my heritage is, and it's also the heritage of these sheep. Plus, I know, you know, I have been at the place where the heritage of this yarn is, so I visited the farm and everything. So, and because it carries through the whole, you know, the whole north of Germany in its fibers, I found it very fitting to call it Heritage. So this yarn, we will have quite a bit more of it available because, as said, I was able to purchase the whole yearly shearing of the shepherd. And we also added a bit of fiber to it with my mill together to give it a light tint, like natural sheep's tint, let's say it that way. And since we also managed to get such a large batch, we were able to get 2 weights spun up. So it's going to be available in Heritage 4-ply and Heritage DK. So without further ado, let me show them to you. So this is the natural beigey tone of the yarn. And this is Heritage 4-ply and Heritage DK. And the 4-ply version has a 400 meters per 100 grams, and the DK version has a 275 meters per 100 grams. But these are both woolen spun, so they are slightly more voluminous than a worsted spun yarn. And so even though a 275 meters might sound a little bit too thin for a DK weight, it is a true DK weight because of the makeup of the yarn. So it's a woolen spun 2-ply and has been minimally processed and is just, you know, pure wool, no additives, no bleach, no nothing. So you might even find little pieces of vegetable matter in it. And this really feels so special because, you know, I've been involved in almost every process of this, the making of this yarn, and it just always makes me so happy. So yeah, it's feel-wise, I would say it is soft but rustic, which for me also resembles the north of it all. And I would say, like, compared to other yarns that would come from this region, it's still very soft to me. And it has this perfect warm rusticness, if that makes sense. So if I would compare the touch, I would say it's a bit softer than, for example, a tuku wool, much softer than a Letlopi or something, and quite dry to the touch. This yarn also doesn't have a lot of a halo and also not too much of a sheen. It has a little sheen because the sheep breed that I'm also going to talk more about in a bit, that's in this, is a crossbreed with a bit of a blue-faced Leicester heritage. Wow, that was really bad, right? But yeah, it has a bit of a blue-faced Leicester gene, so there is a bit, yeah, a slight a slight sheen to it, and yeah, generally it's very lofty and fluffy, and I can imagine it's beautiful for color work. But speaking of the sheep that are in this one, it's an 80% Scotch mule, which is a crossbreed of a blue-faced Leicester ram with a Scottish black-faced ewe, and that actually makes them hardy enough to withstand our weather conditions here, because blue-faced Leicester sheep would be very tricky to be kept here, at least on a business scale, let's put it that way. Maybe as a hobby shepherd it would be possible, but let's put it very honestly, for a sheep's farm that's trying to make a business out of keeping sheep, the mortality rate would be too high for blue-faced Leicester sheep. Actually, the shepherd once said, this is a very pathetic thing to say, and it's a very sad story, but he said whenever he got his rams in the UK to breed with his ewes, he got the blue-faced Leicester rams, and the breeder of those rams jokingly said he could give him, you know, how do you say, a shovel? No, something to dig a grave out of, or with. He could just give that to him with the sheep, because he knew it would not survive for a very long time, which is very sad. But yeah, it's just those sheep are not really made for our kind of conditions, and would not necessarily thrive in our environment. And so the shepherd started breeding blue-faced Leicester rams with Scottish black-faced ewes, and Scottish black-faced sheep are very hardy and can withstand our weather conditions very well. So, but it's kind of the best of both worlds, because they are hardy and they still have beautiful wool. And so I'm very happy that I was able to get these fleeces, because I think it's very rare to find something this soft in the north of Germany. Quick disclaimer about softness, because I'm saying this word right now, and of course it's something that you are interested in and want me to talk about. However, how you experience softness is something that is highly individual. And I've talked about this in episodes before, but if you ask me about whether a yarn is soft or not, and want some advice from me, I'm not going to answer that question, because I don't want to be the one that's like, oh, of course it's very soft, I can wear it around my neck, no problem, and then it's not suitable for you. So, you know, this is a highly personal topic, and of course I can help you decide whether it's for you or not. So if you are sensitive and you are afraid that heritage might be too rustic for you, then just feel free to send me, I don't know, 1 or 2 yarns that you can tolerate, or 1 or 2 yarns that you cannot tolerate out of, let's say, some widely known yarns. Then I will gladly compare it and share my thoughts with you. But just so you know, I'm not gonna take responsibility and decide that for you, because it's highly individual. And while I have no problem wearing this one around my neck, some other people might have. And what I can do is compare this one to my other standard bases, such as BFM Massam or Shetland Romney. And BFM Massam, it's difficult to compare because it definitely is a different type of yarn. This one is a woolen spun, so it's more fluffy and it doesn't have all its fibers aligned like a worsted spun does. But I would say it's slightly more rustic than BFM Massam and slightly more rustic than Shetland Romney, but it's on the same rate, I would say, as Shetland Romney from my perspective, just so you have a little bit of possibility to think for yourself if it might be something you like. Other yarns I would compare this with feel-wise would be like a tuku wool maybe, and I would say it's slightly softer than that, if that makes sense. It's definitely less rustic than, for example, a Letlopi or a Plötulopi or anything like that. It's definitely much softer than that. But yeah, so far about softness. It's always a tricky topic for me because, you know, I cannot decide that for you. But actually, I should maybe say that my sister, who's way more sensitive than me, she was wearing one of the samples, she was touching one of the samples that we made, and I was actually surprised. Whoops, and now I dropped it. And she was actually surprised that she enjoyed it. So I would have thought it might have been a little too rustic for her because she's very, very sensitive, but she was able to tolerate it. So yeah, sometimes it's just difficult to tell. But for me, it's very soft and woolly and warm, and it's just the perfect amount of rusticness that totally makes me want to knit all kinds of winter and autumn sweaters out of this, because it's just so squishy and bouncy and just very warm, which I love. Okay, I think I've rambled a lot about the basics on this yarn. Let me tell you the story and how it went. So last year when the shearing happened, I went to the shepherd's place and I had my wonderful mom and boyfriend with me who helped me because we only had one day to skirt way over 100 kilos of fleeces. And that was crazy. And yeah, we had a big table and we were skirting all those fleeces. I hope to maybe upload some footage of how that looked like, kind of, or give a couple of snippets of that. So yeah, we sorted all the bad parts out. So there are several things you have to learn about skirting if you want to make your own yarns. But from experience, I know by now what has to be thrown out and cannot be spun. That's like too short of a fiber, where, for example, the shearer has been not cutting in one, but had to cut twice to get the rest of the sheep, and then there are those short staples that are not really usable. Then, of course, dirty parts, vegetable matter, hay, all these things have to be picked out. And we did that, and it was a super hot day, and we were in the shed in the sun for so many hours skirting all those fleeces. But after that, my hands were very well conditioned because of all the lanolin in the fleeces. And I don't know, these moments, you know, whenever I talk to shepherds about shearings and all that, I try to not think about what can be made with that yarn too early, but I wait until I can actually touch the fleeces and I can put my hands into them and smell them. And, you know, that is usually the moment when I try to envision what this yarn shall become, or what these fleeces shall become, and what I envision of this yarn, because, you know, there are so many possibilities on what you can do with a yarn. And I then choose which mill to send it to, what kind of yarn I want with this, what I want this to feel like, and yeah, that's normally the moment where I decide all these things. And yeah, then we packed everything up into big bales and shipped them off to my mill. And then I discussed, you know, I talk about this a bit more in depth on my yarn production video, but then I just discussed with my mill, because whenever it comes there, I also like to hear the thoughts of the mill owners and yeah, you know, learn from their expertise and have their suggestions. So I'm always open for that. And then we discussed and dreamed up the yarn that it should become. And this is the outcome of it. Then the mill spins it. And then at some point I get a call that my yarn is ready. And that's always so exciting, because normally it takes, I don't know, it takes quite a couple of months until a yarn is ready, just because there are so few mills in Europe and especially in Germany left. So it takes a while to get the yarn ready, and then I get a call and I mostly after so many months, I just don't have it present in my head at every time, and so it sometimes not confuses, but surprises me a lot, and then I get reminded that this wonderful yarn is still in the making, and then it comes, and then it's always the best feeling of opening the box and seeing and feeling it for the first time. That's always just super awesome. And then comes the next step, and that's always really exciting, about thinking what I want to make with this, what I want to dye on it, what kind of samples would work with it, and experimenting with the yarn, playing with it, swatching. That's then the part that I enjoy most then, I guess. Not most, I enjoy every part of the process, but it's just so exciting to dream up the potential of this yarn, and it's just lovely. So that happened then, and then I envisioned what I want to do with this color-wise, and also with the different yarn ways that we got, what we could do with it. And the really cool thing about Heritage is that the DK weight version can be achieved, like you can achieve the same gauge swatch with the DK weight version as you can with the 4-ply plus a strand of mohair. And as some of you might know, we now carry a cruelty-free and ethically produced silk mohair yarn called Cloud. And it's really cool because you can just combine them. And so, yeah, we curated a little collection of colors that I'm also going to link below, because that's the March collection where I share all the colorways that will be available on this. But yeah, so I swatched quite a few things, like tighter gauge, more open gauge, with mohair, without mohair, and all these things. And I think we're at the point of this video where I can just show you my swatches. So about swatches, I think with woolen spun yarns it's always very tricky to have just one gauge that you put them at, because they are normally very versatile, because they do bloom quite a bit, but you can also knit them on a slightly tighter gauge without having too stiff of a fabric. And so we swatched a couple of different ones, but I'm just going to show you the basic swatches. And this is the Heritage 4-ply in the natural colorway, like the undyed. And this is knitted on a 3.5mm needle, and you can see that it's super bouncy, which I actually enjoy a lot. It's really elastic almost, which is so fascinating because it's just pure wool, no elastic additives or whatever. But yeah, this is a 4-ply swatched on a 3.5mm needle, so if you just held it single. Then we have the same for the DK version. And this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is a 4mm needle. And the same bounciness is achieved with the DK weight version. So this is just a standard type of gauge swatch I would do that just results in a pretty standard fabric. And then, just to show it to you, we also swatched the DK on a slightly more open gauge on a 4.5mm needles, but you can see that it's no problem, it's not holy or anything, it's still very bouncy and lofty and lightweight. So this is the 4.5mm needles on the DK version, and this is, it's connected to it, so I still remember what it is. This is the 4-ply version with mohair, a strand of mohair. This is actually, I think this is the undyed, just Cloud in its natural white state. Oh no, it's not. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Sorry. But yeah, you can see that it's pretty much the same gauge swatch size-wise and with the same amount of stitches, but just one has the mohair in it and the other one is just the DK weight on its own. So you can actually achieve the same gauge with either the DK on its own or the 4-ply plus a strand of mohair. Which I find makes this very versatile, because depending on what you want to achieve fabric-wise for your project, I think it gives a lot of options to choose from. And to also show you how it all can be knitted up, I'm going to show you a couple of samples now. About samples, we've made 2 almost full samples, and I'm currently knitting on a pair of socks for my partner as well, who helped me tremendously by driving me to the farmer and helping sort the sheep's fleeces, which is a dirty job, so I'm happy I had help from him and my mom. But he requested a pair of socks because he was like, I was involved in this process, in the making of this yarn, I want to have a pair of socks out of it. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, but I cannot really tell you how it holds up as a sock yarn yet, because I haven't, he hasn't worn them yet because they're not finished yet. But I'll make sure to update you on that as soon as I can. But we also made some other samples, and I'm saying we because I did not knit these. It was my mom who made these because you know, some of you might have seen on Instagram, but the last couple of months were really busy because I was looking for a new studio space that I happily also found. But now we're in the middle of renovating it and it's almost done, but you know, knitting time was really short and I still wanted to showcase this yarn properly. Plus I needed a new cardigan. And so I was happy Mom jumped in and made this beautiful sample first. And this one is the Zakuri cardigan by Noriko Ishikawa. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name completely, but it's a lovely boxy cardigan with a couple of clever details, such as this rolled hem. Can you see? There's a rolled hem below the ribbing and some same on the cuffs that I really love. But other than that, it just has a very clean, boxy and minimalistic silhouette with a raglan construction, and it's just absolutely beautiful because it's very minimalistic and just 100% my style, if I may say so. So yeah, I hope to insert a couple of clips of me wearing this cardigan, but it's just absolutely lovely, and the fabric that the yarn created is super lightweight and very bouncy, but still super warm. I wore this yesterday when I was taking some video footage for these videos and for the intros, and it was incredibly warm, like very warm, but still super lightweight, which I absolutely love. I'm also going to show you the back, just so you can also have an idea of what kind of fabric this yarn creates. So it really looks so beautiful, I feel. So yeah, this is the Zakuri cardigan, and it's actually the swatches I showed you with the DK and the 4-ply weight with mohair. Those are the swatches for this cardigan, so it works perfectly in the DK weight version, which is what Mom used for this sample, as well as with the 4-ply version plus a strand of mohair. I mean, every knitter knits differently, don't quote me on that, but it should work, and I think it would also be very pretty with a strand of mohair. Would get a little bit more of a whimsical vibe, maybe. But yeah, this is a Zakuri cardigan and I'm just extremely happy with it. Can't wait to wear this now that days are getting a little bit warmer and I might be able to sit outside sometimes to knit in the evenings maybe or so. Then it would be lovely to wear this Then next up, we also wanted to sample something with a little bit of mohair used with it, so we could really showcase how it looks like. And so Mom also cast on for the Javelin shawl, and this one is not finished, it's still on the needles, so it's a bit tricky to show. It's a beautiful textured shawl, and I'm just absolutely in love with these little elements here. The pattern is by Teti Lutzak of Teti's Knit Garden, I think she's called. And actually, Mom and I just thought when we saw it, this bottom part for the first time, we both thought it pretty much looks like those long windows you sometimes find in old cathedrals. So I really love how that looks like. And for this shawl, the yarn is actually the Heritage 4-ply with a strand of cloud silk mohair, and in this case it's the undyed, so it's this one. It is this combination, so just a strand of Heritage 4-ply and a strand of cloud silk mohair. And you can see that the little silk threads are poking through, so there is a bit of a marling effect throughout. However, if you wanted something a bit more with less of a contrast, we also dyed a corresponding mohair shade to go with either the 4-ply or the DK version of the Heritage yarn. So this is the Javelin shawl by Teti Lutzak, and this is another staple that I'm really absolutely can't wait to wear outside. And I also, because I sometimes get really cold when I do my admin work at my computer or when I'm editing videos or so, and I think it would be really lovely to have just a huge blanket of a shawl that I could just throw over my shoulders and keep myself warm while editing or doing admin or emails or whatever. But yeah, that is that shawl, and yeah, I guess that is it for the samples. Oh, I should maybe show one more time. I should show the sample of the shawl next to the Zakuri, because there you can see how the cloud, it lightens up the color. Let me see if this, can you see this? But yeah, it's a bit difficult with just two hands, but maybe you can see how the color is a bit lightened up by using a white strand of mohair, or it's not a complete white, but an ecru white strand of cloud. But I guess we're done with the sample section. If you have any further questions on these samples, feel free to ask me. I think, if I'm not mistaken, for the Zakuri cardigan, I think it was about 400 grams of the DK weight version that Mom used for my size, which is a size 4. Yeah, so I think I will definitely double check and add the exact amount of grams somewhere here, but that's how it is. And with the Javelin, it's not finished, so I can't weigh it yet, but I think the pattern calls for 900 meters in total, so you would be okay for the full size. You would definitely be okay with 3 skeins of the Heritage 4-ply and also 3 skeins of cloud. That should be enough. So yeah, I guess so far about the samples. As mentioned, if I missed out something or if I forgot something, you can always write me an email at hello@woollentwine.com. And until then, I will start chatting you through some pattern suggestions. So speaking of pattern suggestions, I've curated a little list of patterns that I think would work with either DK 4-ply or 4-ply plus mohair, or even DK plus mohair could be thinkable, but I don't think I included a pattern in that worsted weight range. No, I don't think I did that, but you could totally also knit worsted weight patterns with just combining the DK with a strand of cloud. That's not a problem. But in this list, I'm not gonna have them in any particular order, but each of these patterns should be either doable with the DK or the 4-ply plus mohair or the 4-ply on its own. So that's how I kind of grouped them together. So the first pattern is a pretty recent release by Midori Hirose of Midori's Knit House. I'm so bad with these names, but her name is Midori Hirose, and the pattern is called White Mountains Light, and it's a lighter version of her worsted weight White Mountains sweater, and this one is just a more lightweight version. And what's really cool about Midori's patterns is that she always adds different modification options and different yarn options on whether you want to have a single strand, 2 strands, an open gauge, and not so open gauge. So it's really versatile, and I think it would be glorious in heritage. So that would be really pretty and very minimalistic, more in the Zakuri cardigan kind of range. Then of course the Zakuri cardigan is something that I can definitely include to this list, and it's just absolutely beautiful. Again, the designer is Noriko Ishikawa, and it's also more on the minimalistic kind of side. Speaking of slightly more, let's say, textural, a bit more out there patterns, I also included the first sweater by Lizzie Hester, which is also kind of minimalistic still, but it has a beautiful textural element on the sleeves. That's kind of like a ribbing starting from the raglan line and going down the sleeves. So that's still quite minimalistic, but I think it's, you know, there's a little twist to it. Then I also included some more textural patterns that I absolutely adore. One of them being the Hako by Jenny Ansa of Koti Kotoni, whom I'm happy to call my friend. And although all these pattern suggestions are completely decided by myself, no one has asked me to include them in this list or whatever. Please don't think that. But I'm just absolutely in love with everything Jenny does. She's an incredibly talented designer with an eye for such new things and new textures, and she combines them in such a nice way that they are exciting to knit, look exciting, they have really clever details, but they are still very wearable, and also her yarn choices are just always complementing those elements so well. You know, I'm just a big fan. And the Halko is a DK weight sweater with loads of textural elements that I think would pop really well in a woolen spun yarn, I can imagine. And I'm actually thinking of knitting myself an oversized version of it, because I can imagine it's gonna be, you know, it's like a modern twist to those classic old school cable sweaters. You know, I do like these type of sweaters, but I think a more modern twist to it with the Halko would be really cool. Then I also have another pattern by Wei Chen of the Petite Knitter that is called Hütte, I think. And that one is a colorwork pattern that I think would look glorious in heritage, because as every woolen spun yarn, it's gonna be blooming quite a bit when you block it, and so I think it's very suitable for color work. We also made sure that while dyeing the colorways, we made sure that there are a lot of contrasts possible also with the undyed shade, just so you can really have a lot of choices there, I guess. Another pattern by Wei Chen is the Tuku, which is a DK weight colorwork sweater, and I absolutely adore that one. I've been wanting to make one for myself for so long, and today, while shooting the colorway preview video, I might have found my dream combination for that one. So yeah, I can really imagine a tuku or even a hütte, because we have this in both ways, in blackberry and the undyed shade. So that's a lovely combo, I guess. And then I have another pattern by my friend Jenny that I absolutely love, and that one is called, I think it's called Niti, and it's a glorious cardigan that is, I think it's inspired by meadows, or it even means meadow. Don't quote me on that, but the like small bubbly textural elements on the sleeves and on the bottom of the cardigan, like at the hem. And that one is just so fun and so spring-like, and I feel it's just absolutely lovely and shows that Jenny's eye for cool elements is just awesome. So, and while I think I'm not a huge fan of bubbles normally, and I really don't enjoy them in worsted spun yarns, but in woolen spun yarns, when they can bloom a bit more and have more of a rounded shape, I do like them actually. So I can really imagine that one in a woolen spun yarn would look absolutely fabulous. And yeah, it would also be nice because while bubbles can add a bit of heaviness to a garment, with a woolen spun yarn you wouldn't have any issue, because, you know, there's a lot more air trapped in between the fibers, and so that would not be an issue. I think, I'm looking at my notes here, sorry, but I think, yeah, we're done with the sweater patterns, and I'm now moving on to shawls. And the first one I want to mention, there's the Javelin shawl by Teti Lutzak that I also showed you as the sample. That one is just lovely, I think. Then there's another recent release by Inez Sang, I think is her name pronounced like. And that one is the Smilga shawl, and it's a masterpiece. Speaking of bubbles, that's a lot of bubbles. No, but it's an all-over textural shawl with a neutral color, and then she, like a little intarsia type of color work, she added all those bubbles in like a I'm really bad at explaining this, but maybe you can just look at it yourself. But it's just a glorious pattern, and I'm absolutely in love with this, even though it's a bit out of my comfort zone with that amount of bubbles. But I think it would be wonderful knit in the Heritage 4-ply, especially because she also uses a neutral, and then she adds different colors, some with more, some with less contrast in those little bubble sections. It's beautiful. But then we also have a little bit more of a minimalistic kind of shawl that I totally love, and that I think would be really glorious as well in Heritage 4-ply plus a strand of mohair, and that would be the Windgate shawl by Fiona Ellis, I think. And that one is just, it's really interesting because it looks, you know, as a kid when you folded paper against each other for a couple of times and then you pulled it out and it looked, you know, it has these up and downs, and I'm really bad at explaining this shape, but you know, and it looks as if this happened to the shawl. It's really fascinating, I feel. And it's just a huge triangle in those kind of geometrical lines, and it's just very beautiful. And I've been wanting to knit myself one for ages, but I've never come across yet. But yeah, I might have to finally do that, maybe over the summer. And then last but not least, another more minimalistic pattern that has been really popular recently, although I have to admit I only found out about it very late. I don't know, sometimes I feel as if I'm living under a rock, but that one is the Colling shawl by Chris Berlin Knits, I think is her username. And that one is a very minimalistic kind of ribbed shawl that's also very big and has a very interesting shape. So yeah, that should also work very well in Heritage 4-ply, if I'm not mistaken about the gauge right now. But last but not least, I have a couple of suggestions about hats, which I only have two, and I think I've recommended those already sometimes go for other yarns, but I just love them. And those are the Brüm hat by Melody Hoffman, which is a very simple hat that is normally knitted in some unspun yarn with a strand of mohair, but I think it would work super well with the DK weight with a strand of mohair. Ah, there is the worsted weight pattern. I knew I had something in the list, and I can really imagine that would look really pretty. And yeah, if you are not too sensitive around your forehead and you can tolerate mohair around your forehead, I think it would be very lovely to make a Brüm hat. And the other one is the Aska hat by Anne-Michelle Phelan, which is the one that I think I wore in the video around the January collection, or was it February already? Oh gosh, I'm really lost. Anyways, it was, I have an Aska hat, and it's one of the best fitting hats I ever had. And actually I have two versions of it, one of them being in a worsted spun and one in a woolen spun yarn, and the woolen spun one sits even better. So I guess using heritage for that one would be really nice, especially because in the pattern there are different versions included. Whether you would like to hold something with the yarn, like a mohair, or just use it on its own, there are several versions in the pattern, so that also gives a lot of options. And then last but not least, I think I have two sock recommendations, even though I don't know how it holds up as a sock yarn. Don't quote me on that. It's not designed to be a sock yarn. But I'm currently knitting the Homebody socks by This Handmade Life, and those are just really beautiful, and I'm making them for my partner at the moment. They are like a broken, how do you call this, garter stitch rib. So it's like you knit a ribbing, but the usually purl stitches are garter stitch, so there's a bit more texture in between the ribs, if that makes sense. Those are really pretty. And then there is a pattern that's called Unity by Nina Danskanen, and that one has a lot of texture going on all over, and it's originally designed in Tuku fingering, I think. And since it has the same touch and feel, I would say it works really well in heritage 4-ply, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, pretty much I would say, this is a bold statement now, but I would say all kinds of patterns that are designed in either Tuku fingering or DK could work. You might have to adjust gauge a little bit, but they could work in heritage 4-ply or DK, just because I feel it's a very similar touch to the yarn. Anyhow, that was my little pattern suggestions list. So last but not least, let me get to the last section and chat you through some admin things. So admin things. The first batch of this yarn will release with the March collection, and I'm going to link the date and everything down below. There will also be a full dedicated video on the colorways. But since I'm planning to release this yarn also in a second batch, I'm not going to link those in the video or anywhere, because I don't think it makes sense to repost that one later and then having a completely different color collection, then you're confused or something. So it will be, the first batch will release with the March collection, and you can find all info about the March collection in the dedicated video, as well as in my newsletter that I'm gonna send out with the shop update going live. And you can always also follow me on Instagram, so I can keep you updated with little countdown reminders and everything. And since I already know that this question is going to come, I often get asked, how quickly do you think it will sell out, or something like that. And that's always something I can never answer, because I never dare to predict that something's gonna sell out super quickly or whatever. But it's completely unpredictable, and I never know what colorways might be very requested and which ones not. But what I wanted to say is that this yarn generally is limited, and I won't be able to recreate it completely in the same way. So we're gonna have this batch now that is the larger batch, and then there's gonna be the second batch that's a bit smaller than this large batch now. And yeah, from my experience, limited edition yarns usually are quite, I don't know, requested, have been requested in the past at least. And so I would really recommend to be on time for the shop update if you plan on purchasing some of this special yarn. So yeah, I made a large amount with the shepherd initially, but I cannot predict how long it's gonna last. And so even though I'm saying it's gonna be more than the last times, yeah, you know, better safe than sorry. Just be on time if you're looking for something. But yeah, I guess that's everything I have to say. Please watch the colorway preview about the March collection. And speaking for future Jule, the then were actual collection video. I'm definitely gonna inform you about all these things, but generally, please make sure to watch my info videos before shooting me a question, because yeah, that helps a lot in streamlining my processes before a shop update and saving my time, because I mean, I want to provide the best service I can, and especially with a new yarn that you have no way to compare something to. I'm happy to answer all kinds of questions, but maybe consider to watch the informational videos before, because I kind of, with the amount coming in before every update, I just have to yeah, try to somehow work through it without answering too late or whatever. So it's a bit of a challenge, and so I'm just, you know, if you want to do me a favor, then maybe if there's a question, check if I've answered it in the informational video before. But again, if there's something I forgot about, or if there's something that's that you need to know about, then please feel free to message me via email, please, because that's the best way to reach me. And that would be hello@woollentwine.com. I'm also going to link it down below. But yeah, I guess we're at the end of this video. Okay, so I hope you're as excited about this new yarn as I am, and I hope that you're having a lovely time, and see you in the next episode. Bye!